Red Couch Theology podcast here, and you're just now getting sound. Oh, shoot. This was my fault 100%, and it's the most rudimentary issue, as I just didn't even turn on our sound system. I forgot how to run a podcast.
And we talked such smart things for the first.
We actually solved world hunger, and she's calling me now. Yeah, I got it fixed. Thanks. Appreciate it. All right, bye. That was our comms director. Like, look at our comms director. Shout out to Teresa.
Shout out
to Teresa, who is making sure that we're not incompetent.
Yeah. And she's doing that when you're here as well, which is like... hello, everyone. Welcome to the
I feel like we were like on the...
We were on a roll.
We were flowing.
Yeah, we were. Yeah. After the first 5 minutes of arguing about wasps versus bees, which will now never get air, which I'm actually sad about. We're now just straight into it.
All right, yeah. So we're going to dive right in, and the podcast listeners will benefit from the editing skill. Yeah. We'll trim that out for the YouTube later. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got a question. So here's the plan for this week. We're going to be covering a little bit of John, or the little bit of Alex's first message in the series. Yes? We already got it fixed. Thank you. Look at that. We got like a whole team watching out for us.
This is a team, man. This is like people are on it. I bet I've got messages as well saying no sound. I love it. Man.
This is amazing.
People are just rocking it out. There we go.
I also have a text message randomly from Teresa of little Sebastian.
Well, that seems like a rabbit hole we shouldn't go down.
No, we shouldn't. All right, so we're going to cover the last 2 weeks of sermons because we commandeered the podcast for the end of the previous series last week. So here's a question that came in.
Yep.
I'm not going to read the whole thing because you and I just covered it a little bit, but this is a question about John chapter 1, those early portions, and how it relates to the nature of Jesus being divine and human. I'll read some selections here. Alex mentioned how John was less concerned about the beginning, but more with who Jesus is. Talking about verses 1 through 3.
I think I said less concerned with Genesis and more concerned with Jesus.
Okay. This is what the question is. Okay. I'm just reading a question. Okay. You can't argue with the question.
No, I thought that's how you read it the first time as well, so I just wondered.
No, it said less concerned about the beginning, but more in who Jesus is when talking about verses 1 through 3.
Interesting. So I had a slide that said John is less interested in Genesis than he is about in Jesus, and so I think one of the really interesting things with John is how, like, to him, you can't go far enough back to understand Jesus. So like when you read Mark and John, if you take away chapter 1, the first half of the first 18 verses of chapter 1 of John, Mark and John actually start very similar. They're just like, and there was a man called John, and he was preaching and baptizing people, and then Jesus appeared, and John said Jesus is the one. Like, they're actually just crazy similar. But John adds this like 18 verses of wonder to his opening. So Mark just starts straight off. This is the beginning of the ministry of Jesus. A man named John came and started baptizing. Matthew and Luke, 2 other biographies, go further back to birth stories, and actually kind of, I think Matthew takes Jesus' lineage all the way back to Abraham. Luke goes even further back. He goes all the way back to Adam. And I also always imagine John. Have you ever seen the movie Aladdin?
Yeah.
There's the bit where he's like trying to create some kind of animal for Aladdin. The genie's trying to create some kind of animal for Aladdin to ride on, and he's going through these different things. He's like, still not enough. And then he turns him into an elephant. And I always picture John doing that with his opening to the gospel.
Yeah.
It's like, still not enough. Like, Adam, that's not enough. And so he goes all the way back to Genesis 1, verse 1. In the beginning.
And he almost
goes
before that. Before the beginning, almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the beginning was the
like
word.
He was already there. Now, I think if you're a first century reader, you might not use these terms because this is a later literary term, actually began with an 18th century, 19th century New Testament scholar. It looks like what's called retroactive continuity. Like you go back and
We're busting out some big words.
Yeah. Well, what that means is you go back and you tweak a story to make it mean something else. Like a good example is, I didn't use this on Sunday, is Spider-Man. So in the original Spider-Man comics, Peter Parker gets bitten by a radioactive spider. Yeah. And that story works because everyone in that time was terrified of the effects of nuclear bombs, like what it might mean. Yeah. That was the thing. Then you fast forward to like early 2000s and they start making Spider-Man again, late 90s. Well, suddenly he gets bitten by a spider, but it's no longer a radioactive spider. It's a genetically modified spider. Yeah, because it's now 1990 and no one cares about nuclear anymore. It's
but they're worried about cloning. But
everyone's like, what about cloning? Yeah. Dolly the sheep and all those kind of things. Yeah. So it's just it's a change to the story that enables you to tell a new story.
So you're saying this didn't happen?
Well, what I'm saying is that his point isn't just so you know something different happened in Genesis. I think anyway, and other scholars would agree. Other scholars would agree. Not to put myself in that crowd.
I just need you to know that I'm one of them. Just by the way,
me and the other guys, me and NT Wright, etc. What they would say is this: that John isn't just writing about Genesis for its own sake. To John, the only way he can explain Jesus is that Jesus was there in the beginning. That's the thing that like makes the Jesus story make sense. There is no way of understanding it without going all the way back to the beginning. Okay. So it's again.
So why does that help? Why does John feel that urge and need?
Because he's trying to get across a story that's unexplainable. He's like, how do you explain the unexplainable? Like, how do you explain something that's like that mysterious? You're trying to explain something that nobody's ever seen. It's like if I just make up a creature and like, I'm just going to explain this to you. And you're like, wait, what? So John's trying to...
So he's saying the person of Jesus is unexplainable.
Yeah.
Unless we think of him as being there from the very beginning.
Yeah, and that's why when you hear him talked about within the Gospels, like none of the terms fit completely. Like, is he the Messiah? Yeah, but that's not everything. It's bigger than that. Okay. So somewhere John's got to like get across. No, this is what it really is, and that's hard to do. And so he does that is he says Jesus was there all the way back there in the beginning.
Okay, so that brings us to the second part of the question, which starts to ask more of a Trinity kind of a question, or maybe Christology kind of a question, which is like the nature of Jesus, right? So the second part of the question, there's a lot of arguments surrounding the Logos and how John was using it that Mormons and others with less Trinitarian beliefs have trouble with. I guess I'm asking for some deeper explanation of terminology and how other scriptures back up those claims of Jesus being God. So they're wanting us to make a case both from this passage and from maybe a larger set of texts that Jesus is God, that he's divine and not just a great teacher.
John is really helpful for that, both here and at the end of John in John 20, when it talks about Thomas kneeling down and worshiping him, and Thomas makes this statement, "My Lord and my God." you know, that I think one of the cult sort of beliefs tried to claim that he said, "My Lord, oh my God," or something like that, which definitely stretches the language. Like definitely like a vocative feel to that language. And
there's plenty of other things that hint at his deity. Yeah.
And then Romans, Paul, I think Romans 9, Paul pushes into that language as well. So it's there overall. But I think one of the things we have to appreciate is just how groundbreaking this news was, even to those first disciples. So it's suddenly you're starting to hear that. Someone once said to me, they phrased it like this, and I think this was really helpful because I think a lot of Christians struggle with language like God and Jesus, or God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And of course, like God actually has limited use in the scriptures in general.
Yeah.
And what this person said is, I think it's helpful if you understand that in the Old Testament, the covenant name for God is Yahweh. I am who I am.
Yeah.
And in the New Testament, we find out that the covenant name for God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That actually, like, that's both a name that can be separated into three persons, but it's an overarching name that refers to the one God of the universe.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we just struggle with it. Like even just, we struggle with like trying to have one and turn it into three. And I'm trying to remember who said this. Maybe it was Richard Rohr said, like, I actually think it's easier to start with three and turn three into one than it is the other way around.
Yeah.
Because it's not a natural, nothing that we do, nothing that we've seen can explain it fully. We try using things like H2O. We're like, well, there's H2O and then there's gas and water and gas, water and ice. But you're like, yeah, but not at the same time.
Yeah.
They're one of those three things at different points. They're not in conversation with each other.
So in one of my theology classes, the professor, when we went into the Trinity section of the course, said, I promise you, I've yet to teach a semester where someone in the class didn't commit a Trinitarian heresy.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
I promise you will be heretical in your paper on the Trinity. So good luck with that.
Yeah.
But he was just like, the point is that we just can't fully apprehend all of that, the implications and the meanings of it. And every single illustration seems to fall short. And you have to just kind of like tiptoe around.
Yeah.
He actually had this heresy meter that you put. And so when we would talk about different things, he's like, tell me some of your favorite illustrations of the Trinity. And someone would be like, oh, this one was the best one I've ever heard. And they're like, these young students are like, oh, this exciting one, like where, like you have water or something.
Yeah, like piano chords is another one that comes up.
Yeah,
one of those chords is actually, one of those notes is the same note as the chord and two of them aren't.
Yeah.
Like, they never quite work.
Yeah, there's like, oh, but this one's perfect. It's like, and then he's just like heresy meter.
Yeah.
And then we go through, and then the course you learn all these things.
And I think the thing that you hope you understand in the end is that I think we in the West, especially post like modern period, like 1800s ish, we think God is somebody or something to be understood. And actually, I think most of the writers think he's someone to be experienced. And that they're trying to do the best they can to explain what they've experienced so that we can experience it too. Like if you can get to the end of an understanding about God on this earth with the knowledge that you have, then man, eternity is going to be a pretty boring experience. I mean, it seems like the whole point of, or part of the beauty of eternity is that we do what C.S. Lewis talks about in the Screw Tape Letters, where there's this moment of revelation, which is like, oh, that was you all along. Like,
Yeah. Okay.
So
all right.
I think understanding what a good goal has to be held in tension with this idea that we're trying to understand the ununderstandable. We're trying to explain the unexplainable.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that that's super helpful to get at this question. And what they've asked us essentially to do is maybe make a little bit of a systematic theology case for the deity of Christ.
Yeah.
To sort of like ground his deity in some other passages. You already hinted at a few of them.
Yeah.
But then I would love to back up a little bit more and talk about why does John, the author of this book, have this urge to like swell the image of Christ into this grandeur space, and what kind of literary tricks is he playing to pull that off? So are there any other things we want to say about the nature of God to help people, whoever asked this question, to ground to them a little bit? Is Jesus actually God?
Yeah.
Perfect. End of story. Good podcast on theology.
But I think you're right in that it's at times almost whispered. It's at times you can almost feel the nervousness of the authors as to what they're like, what they're potentially saying. That's the weird thing about like talking about God, is that we're talking about something so far beyond us that when you say something new like that, and we talk about inspiration of the writers, but inspiration is not the same as simply translation. Like God is leading them to write what they write.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they are getting like a clear word for word like sentences. They're humans that have to include their humanness in the story.
Yeah.
And so when we hear them talking about that, we're like, oh man, like I can almost feel like the newness of what they're writing and just how groundbreaking it is for them. I mean, we pick up this early enough in terms of like the synoptic gospels include less of that language, but the letters of Paul include that language. Like Philippians 2 is one that stands out, that though being in nature very God, or being by nature God, he did not consider that something to be
equality,
grasped, but made himself nothing.
And then Hebrews 1 and then John chapter 1 and then there's all these different stories throughout the synoptic gospel. Well, I think one of the tricky parts, for a show that got us started a little late because we didn't have sound, I think things like the hypostatic union, you want to throw out some theology at you, that is the conversation about how can he be fully God, fully man.
Yeah.
And then the Trinity are such, they're theological doctrines that are formed through the crucible of time and meditation on the scriptures. It's really hard to do that in a 1 hour episode.
Yeah.
So maybe a story might help. I think Alex gave you some passages you could look at. We could rattle those off again if you wanted to jot down.
I would add to the list that we gave John chapter 8, which I think is a really interesting dialogue.
Yeah.
Where the Pharisees actually say to Jesus something like, "You're not even old enough to have a beard. Like, how would you know anything about Abraham?"
Yeah.
And Jesus, in this very provocative language, says, "Before Abraham was, I am. Not I was, but I am," which is, again, this covenant name for God, or at least a part of it.
Oh, man. See,
he really lands the plane on that idea himself.
Yeah, if you begin, like, to start to get access at some of the claims to deity that Jesus makes throughout the Gospels, if you understand, like, Hebrew scriptures and Hebrew religious tradition, and then some of the culture, it's like he is not beating. Like, for us, it feels like he's beating around a bush and being secretive.
Yeah.
they knew what he was saying, like so aggressively. And so,
well, that's why they try to throw him off cliffs and try to,
they're one of the main reasons why Jesus gets killed on the cross is because of he's claiming to be God.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew it without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
And we were like, did he really think that? Yeah. I mean,
first century person.
Yeah. The first century person wouldn't be asking that question. So, a couple maybe resources to you. One is a little bit of a story from when I took a section on the Trinity in one of my classes. Is we went through a process during this, maybe it was a four-week section of the course dedicated to the Trinity, plus a ton of reading and a paper, where we actually started to trace how the early church fathers and early church theologians formulated the doctrine of the Trinity and all of the conversations. And what you start to find is that, like, if you do a deep dive theologically into the scriptures and into the original context and all these sorts of things, the Trinity is very explicit and clear. It's actually, it stands on very strong doctrinal legs, which is why it's deeply rooted inside of all of the creeds. It's like right down there at the bottom of the faith. This book was my favorite in that class, The Deep Things of God. How the Trinity changes everything. I think it's the best book I've ever read on the Trinity. Do you have any book recommendations?
Off the top of my head, I think there's a book called The Person of Christ by, is it Ian Marshall? Let me look that up really quick.
For the audio listeners, the one I popped up here on the screen was The Deep Things of God by Fred Sanders, How the Trinity Changes Everything. And then you're going to look at one other one up. But then I want to jump backwards into a little bit of a question around what in the world is John up to?
Ian Howard Marshall, yeah.
Ian Howard Marshall, what was the title again?
Yeah, The Person of Christ.
Person of Christ.
Yeah.
So the work
of Christ.
The work of Christ. If you're curious a little bit more about the nature of Jesus and did he actually think he was God, and how does him being fully God and fully man work and all that stuff, then maybe those are some good resources.
One more for you as well is Darrell Johnson, I think, has a book on the Trinity, Experiencing the Trinity. This is a bit more like, if you don't want to tap into like the scholarly stuff, this is a bit more within reach. Experiencing the Trinity, living in the relationship at the center. I think that one's a really good. He's a professor up at Regent's College in Vancouver, but writes really accessibly and preaches a lot in churches on this kind of stuff.
So interestingly, all right, so the question was framed, maybe it had even a hint to Mormonism and how they struggle to see the deity of Christ and all that stuff. So it maybe had a little bit more of an apologetic impulse behind the question. Who cares? Who cares that he's God or man or human? Like, why does it matter to one of our listeners who's a stay-at-home mom who's just trying to figure out how to get her kids fed and out the door on time and so forth? Why does the Trinity and the nature of Jesus matter?
Oh, man, that's a difficult one, because things can matter theologically without always impacting you the way that you think they should or might in your day-to-day life. So
unpack that a little bit.
Well, I think the idea that Jesus loved you and died for you, and that somehow changes everything about your relationship with the Father, that's the first piece of knowledge. So you can walk through this Christian faith for a long time with uncertainty about how the Trinity operates and what that looks like in practical terms.
Yeah.
And continue to grow in your faith and experience God for yourselves. So that to me is always a fascinating question. Like, what do you teach as orthodoxy versus what do you what do you worry about people knowing in a given moment?
Yeah, so I guess that maybe the question I'm actually asking is not, does that mom that I just described or whatever, and any average person in our community, what do they need to know to be a good Christian?
Yeah.
That's not what I'm asking. What I'm actually asking is there some goodness and beauty to be had by getting a deeper understanding of the theology behind the nature of Christ?
So I think the goodness that you're going to experience is the extreme like distance that Jesus traveled to do what he did, and the genuine beauty of being told that not only does some kind of gift of God live within you, but God is actually dwelling within you. I mean, those things are super, super rich. So on a practical level, those are what I would want people to know. In reality, my guess is almost every follower of Jesus is going to nudge closer to the 3 idea than the 1 idea, or closer to the 1 idea than the 3 idea, and they're almost never, not me included.
Yeah.
You know,
So it's not important.
Me and those other scholars included,
Yeah.
are almost never going to get it perfectly balanced. That's not the goal.
Yeah, the goal is not to be able to articulate it
Yeah.
to a doctoral dissertation board and get
Totally.
all the I's
Yeah.
dotted and T's crossed.
I think one of the fun elements of it is, and I think I've even taught this before, that there's a passage in Genesis 18. It's usually listed as something like the oak trees at Mamre or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a story about Abraham.
Yeah.
You know,
Should I pull up that piece of art?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually an icon from the Greek Orthodox Church that goes back, 1,200, 1,300 years or something like that. And it's a picture of Abraham meeting the 3 travelers. Some people wouldn't say that that's a Trinitarian conversation. So it doesn't say that explicitly.
This is not the one I was thinking of. Is that the one you were thinking of?
Yeah, that's the one I think. Yeah, on the right. Yeah, that's good enough. Yeah.
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 There was another. Oh, maybe.
And
it's
obviously,
just,
only some people can see it.
yeah, I'll pull it up. Anyway, so
You
you have
always
this.
love the YouTube people.
Yeah. They're better.
So, and you can if you just search oak trees of Mamre, Mamre icon, you'll find this pretty easily. So it's this picture of these 3 figures that Abraham dines with. Now, in the original icon, when scholars were examining it, they found a substance at the bottom of it that suggested that it had some kind of tackiness to it, almost some glue-like substance. And so they decided to kind of investigate what could have been in this place.
There it is.
On the icon.
This is the one I'm thinking of. And this is the one you're talking about actually now.
And the best conclusions that they came to was at the bottom was a mirror. And so you, like Abraham, got the opportunity to see yourself reflected in this conversation.
Yeah, like somewhere in this region here, maybe.
Yeah.
You're almost meant to be pictured, especially in the Orthodox tradition, which I think has a lot. The Eastern Orthodox Church has a lot to teach us about the Trinity.
Yeah, definitely.
I think one of the traditions is really strong in the Trinity.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to be sort of seeing this picture. The way it's framed is like you're supposed to be almost sitting at the table with the Trinity.
And so that, when I've tried to explain the Trinity to people, I've actually used more often images of a meal, of a dance, of those kind of things that you're invited into.
Mm-hmm.
because it's a very relational concept. So people that have looked at the Trinity over the years have said things like, well, actually, interestingly, like 3 is the first point where you get genuine self-giving love. Like one person to one person, actually, it's entirely self-interested. Whereas with 3, it becomes self-giving. So there's almost this like, there's this continuous self-giving relationship between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, while also maintaining this unity. Like it's actually beautiful when you think about it. And so different to what we'll ever get to experience outside of that.
And so some of what you're getting to is actually, it's not necessarily for you to like understand the doctrine of the Trinity in order to enter the faith tradition of a follower of Jesus. Uh-huh. But there's richness to be had in the sense that you start to, as you meditate on the scriptures, as you meditate on some of these doctrines, there's this beautiful reality that can actually be really transformative to your faith to know that God's inviting you into a relationship of love that is pure in the gospel. There's a beautiful reality to the nature of Jesus to know that he is, for example, the Philippians 2 passage, that he is living his holy life, leveraging his humanity rather than his deity.
Yeah.
And why is that important? Because it means that you can do as he does. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you stay connected in relationship with the Father.
Yeah, that's such an important part.
Powerful.
And actually really
by the power of the Spirit.
Really uncomfortable for some people.
Really uncomfortable. And then the deity part it's so important for the sake of atonement theory for us to understand the gravity of the sacrifice that was made on our behalf. How does one human's death thousands of years ago have anything to do with us, which we've talked about on the show now? Well, when the quality of this being is divine, it's of infinite value and has the capacity to pay off every debt of all humans in all of history, and on and on and on. And so then you start to appreciate all that God is and does, and your worship can increase by understanding these doctrines. But on an average every day, is it important? Well, maybe not, but it is these beautiful invitations to get to know who he is better. Yeah.
One of the interesting things around the divinity of Jesus that I think is missed by us living when we do. There was actually language around Son of God in multiple places around this time, especially in the Roman cult, where a son would name his father a god after he died.
Wicked move there, yeah.
With the convenience that he would then become a son of God and also divine. So they just lived with a broad assumption across multiple cultures that the Son of God was divine like the father, or the daughter of a god was divine like the mother. And so for us, it gets a little bit more philosophical, but for them, that was just a natural understanding and almost like claimed territory.
Yep.
So while in a Jewish tradition, God has no sons, which is interestingly why Muslims claim that Jesus can't be divine, because the name Allah actually means something like God has no son. And so there is this like idea floating around, well, imagine if he did, who would that son be? And so for them, you actually find passages in the Gospels where it says like, oh, he claimed to be the Son of God, making himself equal with God.
Yeah.
Like, we don't get that today. We're like, wait, but a son's not equal to his father. But for their culture, no, it totally made sense.
Yeah, like he grows up and becomes the thing that he's,
So again, like, we're a little bit out of time with all of this. Yeah. Because even up until the 16th century, atheists don't exist. I mean, they're just not there, really. They're like, and in the 16th century, even the worst murderer believes that a God will judge him at some point.
Yeah, go read some Dostoevsky. Yeah.
And then you get to the 21st century, and even the most devout pastor or priest will have questions about, like,
Does God exist?
yeah. So that's just
yeah.
some of the shift we've experienced societally.
So do you mind if we change gears a little bit?
No.
All right. Perfect. Because I think this will help us spill a little bit beyond this passage. We've just gone at really meta level, almost systematic theology level. But the book of John, so maybe at the series level, John seems to be trying to accomplish some unique things compared to the rest of the Gospels.
Yeah.
And you've already hinted at he has maybe the strongest theological agenda. And we may not, like, so maybe you're listening there. What do you mean by John has an agenda? Like, that may feel uncomfortable to you to think of the Bible as the author of a book of the Bible as having his own agenda. And that's a different conversation, a complexity there. But
Yes.
let's just paint a picture of the Gospels. We have Mark, probably the earliest
Of the Gospels, yeah.
of the Gospels. It has this, like, I've got to get this down sense. It's
like there's even theories that Mark was actually written as a play
oh yeah,
because the ending's so, like, dramatic.
yeah.
It's like, and they heard he was risen. Nothing.
Yep.
Like, it just leaves you with that, like,
Dun,
what?
dun, dun.
I got to find out more about this.
Yeah, and so then, so Mark has this, like, immediacy sentence. In fact, that's a word that shows up all over the place. It's like so fast. It's high paced.
If you wrote like Mark wrote, you would get bad grades in an English test.
And then you have probably Matthew, right?
Yeah, Matthew or Luke is a bit of a toss.
Yeah. And Matthew seems to be trying to win over the hearts of the Jews a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, let me do a little bit more Old Testament references to try and convince the Jewish world that Jesus was the Messiah.
Yeah.
And then Luke is the most, maybe, like, if you are a typical American, maybe Luke's good for you because he's maybe the most obsessed with chronology.
Yeah.
He's a little bit more systematic,
Yeah.
which just tends to be how our Western minds prefer. He's a doctor.
Yep.
He tells Theophilus that his agenda is to write an orderly account, all of this stuff, right?
And he uses a lot of, like, in English, it's like a lot of whilsts and, like, you know.
Yeah.
Jesus went to a fountain whilst he was there. A woman approached him.
Yeah. So it's a little
of
higher language. He's a doctor. He's really well educated. It's all one unit. Luke and Acts is all one unit. So he actually tells both Jesus' story and the early story of the early church. So there you go. Now, John is the latest. There's like a big gap to his authorship. He's an old man, most likely.
Yeah.
And he's had the longest amount of time to stew in all of the other Gospels, conversations with his friends who walked and talked with Jesus, seeing the early church form. And he's literally sat with the theological implications. So I want maybe for our audience to picture, like, a really wise old man who's been walking with Jesus both physically and spiritually through the Spirit for the longest out of anyone. And then he comes to the text with an agenda to teach us about this amazing man he knew. So that's what we mean by agenda. So then, so that's what you were kind of talking about at the beginning, where you're like, he wants to swell this bigger and more grand than anyone has so far.
One of the interesting things when you talk about, like, authorial intent with the Gospels is it may be like it raises our antenna a little bit because of the word we use, inspiration. Now, I think low key across most followers of Jesus that haven't, self-confessedly really dived into theology or understood, like, how the scriptures are put together. They hear inspired, and they assume that the writers of the books in the scriptures were inspired and they knew they were inspired.
Yeah.
Like that they were writing and they're like, I'm totally writing scripture here. And so I'm like listening.
Because they're almost like in a trance or something.
Yeah. And I'm listening and I'm just penning it down as I'm like giving it trance style. There's actually nothing in the scriptures that say that at all. Like inspired actually is just as inspired when you're inspired and you don't know it versus inspired and you do know it. They wrote because they felt led to write. And some of them wrote situational letters and some of them wrote biographies of Jesus' life. But the inspired isn't necessarily about how they approached it or what they knew about what they were writing. It's about the text itself. People in the church gathered together around 350 AD, and this had been an ongoing conversation, and they said, these are the texts that we see God's fingerprint on. So none of those first writers are like, guys, make sure if there's a book, this goes in there, because it's definitely inspired. Like, because
I mean, there's a few like little hints. Like we get some pretty early accounts of Peter referencing Paul's writings as God's words. You know, so like you get a couple, and this is all part of bibliology.
That's just part of that ongoing conversation.
Totally.
It's not, Paul's not saying that necessarily.
But what Alex is saying is absolutely true. Like if you have this impression, and this, maybe we should offer, I would love to offer a hermeneutics and bibliology class someday for those who want to be in the nerdy space of like, how is the Bible formed? But I think it is a perception in a lot of Christians that the Bible that we have now was delivered by a dove to the doorstep of some monastery in the 1600s. Yeah. And that's why we know it's inspired, because it was miraculous that it dropped into a doorstep.
I think a passage that actually really illustrates this well, and I'm going to struggle to remember the exact reference, but Paul has a textual conversation with the Corinthians where he gives them a couple of things to do. Mm-hmm. And he says, of one, not the Lord, but I tell you this. And in another one, he says, not I, but the Lord tell you this. So there's this one moment where he has this feeling that what I'm telling you, definitely, I believe this is something God is saying to you.
Yeah, 1 Corinthians 7, 10 through 12. To the married, I give this command, not I, but the Lord. Yeah. And then later on, he says, I, not the Lord. Yeah. So he's got one passage where he's like, this is God telling you this, as far as I can tell. And then he's got another where he's like, I don't know if God is saying this at all, but this is what I would give you as a piece of wisdom. Now, the early church, in that process that began all the way back here with Peter saying things like twisting Paul's words like they do the other scriptures, and all the way through that early church period with Irenaeus talking about who wrote which of the Gospels, which don't have a name attached to them, except for Luke. Like they don't really have that sense of like, actually Luke doesn't either. It just is implied. So they don't have any of those things attached, but he started to say, no, Mark wrote this first, and then this one, and then this one, and this is why they wrote. All that process all the way up to 350 AD at the councils that decided this. I think is it Council of Trent that finally canonizes? I can't recall. Maybe? You're the one I would ask.
350 AD. Someone there looked at Corinthians as a whole and says, this is inspired. Despite Paul's uncertainty about specific parts.
So the council disagrees with Paul. About
this part, yeah. He's like, we're going to put this in the scriptures. We think this is inspired by God. God is behind this and breathing on it, and he's bringing...
Even though Paul explicitly says...
Despite what Paul feels about part of his writing.
Yep.
Which, again, is just fascinating as to the process.
Yeah.
You would think if Paul knew concretely what he was writing would be in the scriptures at some point, he'd be like, I'm not going to put this part in just in case you take it the wrong way. He's erasing his teaching around not the Lord, but I. It's like, no, can't include that.
Yeah, and so so to bring it back home, and maybe for the sake of conclusion, as we enter into this book of John, some of that is true, that it might be helpful. Each week as we talk about these chapters, imagine the wisest, walking with Jesus the longest, literally physically talking and walking with Jesus for a portion of his life. This is the person of John, and he has this desire for us to know Jesus at a more intimate level. And that's his theological agenda. And so then he's actually arranging these stories in a specific order. He's the least chronological. And so he's got that agenda on the mind, which is, I think, is a great segue into your message this last Sunday, because remember what John's agenda is, to show us that Jesus is the best and most important and most amazing. And then we get into this story about John the Baptist, and John the Baptist, like, describe what you sort of the big idea-ish that you came up with for this, this particular account of John the Baptist, because he illustrates almost the thesis of the whole book, right?
Yeah. So yeah, this John's account of John the Baptist, again, like flagging the elephant in the room, John versus John, and like sometimes trying to figure out who's saying which is complicated. Well, certainly which, I mean, it's the most distinct. Like that there is more going on here and more proclamations by John. Like John talks about baptizing Jesus and having this awareness that he isn't qualified to do that. You know, in the other gospels, it's like, you should be baptizing me. Yeah. So there's an awareness that Jesus is someone distinct. And then there's this vision that he has of the Spirit coming down on him. But in John, it's very concrete language. So he sees Jesus, and he's already alluded in the first part of the text we covered to one's coming who will do more than baptize with water. They'll baptize with the Holy Spirit.
Is this the beginning of the 3-day kind of thing you described
so
on Sunday?
He's got these people that have come to him with questions like, who are you? Like, there's clearly something with John that he stands out. He's very significant as a character. And so as you watch, John is going to brilliantly do two things. He's going to really honor John the Baptist and make him seem like someone significant. And almost in the same breath, he's going to downplay him to like a huge degree. Yeah. So it's like, John was amazing. And then you compare him to Jesus and he's very insignificant. And he's going to do it with John's own words.
And so maybe the moral of the story is the key to being the best is to deflect praise to Jesus.
And he's going to say, John will say that explicitly. John the Baptist will say that explicitly later on in the book. Yeah. He must become greater, I must
and John,
become less.
again, John the author, again, thinking about his agenda of like, let's big fat spotlight, biggest spotlight I can find, every literary tool I can possibly imagine for my entire life. Yeah. I'm going to leverage to try and put a spotlight on
now,
Jesus.
This is something you bring into a sermon necessarily, but there are stories, there are people, writers that have said, you know, somewhere in that latter half of the first century after Jesus' death and resurrection, there's a few writers that try to elevate John back up.
Yeah.
And so part of what John is doing is saying, no, there's no elevating the man that was just a man. The only one that gets elevated is the one who was something more. And so John, the writer, has like this 3-day window where it begins with John saying something like, the king is coming, or the king is here. And we know that he means something like a king because he starts to use language of like, not even worthy of undoing his sandals. And actually the language around Messiah has also framed that idea of kingship as well, because they come and ask John, are you the Messiah? And he says, no one is coming who I'm not even worthy to undo their sandals. So somewhere there's this person that is now identified that's somewhere in their midst, like unnamed. And then on day 2, he very concretely points to,
there he is.
to this is the king. Like this is the one. And both of those are significant. But to me, the third day is the most significant because John is something like a rabbi, if not very explicitly a rabbi. He's a teacher, but has this prophetic tendency as well. So it's hard to put in a box. But in the midst of these 2 days, he with his at least two of his disciples points to Jesus and says, the Lamb of God. And somewhere from the way he says it or what he says, the disciples get the inference, it's time to leave John and follow Jesus.
Yeah, and at this point, it's not because Jesus has a bigger crowd than John. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
So if these two disciples...
they haven't even heard Jesus teach it.
Like if these two disciples' goal was to be, let's be closest to the biggest, coolest trend.
Yeah.
John the Baptist is it.
He's the big trend.
He's the big
story,
trend.
yeah.
And somehow John the Baptist has this ability to convince, stop following this trend, which is me, John the Baptist, and start following that guy who has no one yet.
This is the thing you really want to see. And it's so like bizarrely in our world, it's like an Instagram follower with millions of followers saying like, this is the one you really want to follow.
Yeah, follow this guy, 0 followers.
Yeah. It's like, it's the reverse of our normal joke about Tim Mackey. It's like Tim Mackey saying to his followers, you really want to check out the Red Couch Theology podcast.
Hey, that'd be so funny. Oh, if we could convince Tim Mackey to give us a shout out on this podcast.
It actually was a
but in this case, it would definitely be a downgrade.
Yeah. It's actually a brilliant joke that the writers of, did you ever watch the Ace Ventura movies? Jim Carrey?
Yeah, vaguely. Like,
so they brought out their first movie at the same year. No, it's the second movie. The same year that the Star Wars prequels came out.
Oh man!
And it's huge. Like Star Wars, after 2 decades of nothing, is now making movies again. And so in one of their trailers, they had, if you only see one movie this year, see Star Wars. If you see 2, watch Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
Nice.
I mean, just brilliant, brilliant commercial idea.
Yeah.
John is like, this is the one. Follow him.
So to get back to like the John the author's perspective, like the way he tells the John Baptist story enforces his thesis that Jesus is the best.
Yeah.
Jesus is awesome.
Yeah, this comes up.
He's
over
amazing.
And over again. Yeah.
He is worthy. Yeah. He's all of this stuff. And so like and John the Baptist gets props in as much as he deflects praise to Jesus. That's so cool.
And it's this brilliant triad of days that ends up with this idea that an idea that Jesus actually explicitly says at other points in the synoptics. There has never been anyone like John except Jesus. And comparing John to Jesus is absurd. It's not even on the cards.
That's cool.
So elevating and at the same time diminishing.
So we did something last week for the first time that I feel like we should do a little bit more often. Maybe not always.
Not always, yeah.
But would you pray for our listeners and maybe in their process of trying to do as John the Baptist did, to leverage all of their influence, all of their gifts, all of their resources towards making Jesus great.
Yeah.
Would you pray for
us? Let's do that. Father, we pray for each person listening and for ourselves in the room as well, that we would be able to see Jesus, see him for who he really is, be in awe of him, fall in love with him, be transformed by him, and that we would take every resource we have, our time, our money, our influence, to be able to point other people to him, to say, don't look at me, but look at him.
Yeah.
Because he's the one. For everyone wrestling with what does divinity mean? What does Trinity mean? What does inspiration mean? Would you remind them that they're on a journey, that we value knowledge, And actually, interestingly, you choose to value faith more than knowledge. Yeah. Choose to value obedience over sacrifice. So help us to just keep walking towards you, even when we're uncertain of the path we're on. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in.
See you guys.
And yeah, I've got to find the stop button as always. Do, 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 do.